I did want to talk more specifically about solving multi-step equations. In this example, I'm going to talk about solving for y, even though there are several times that we'd have to solve a multi-step equation just for one variable. In this case, there are two variables, so I'm just solving for y. If there's one variable, you just solve for that one. So I circle the variable that I'm solving for, which is y, and that tells me I got to move everything else away from it. So I got to move this 3x to the other side. So I always look in front of the 3x, and that's how I decide how I move it. In front, it's positive, so the opposite would be to subtract it. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So now I bring down my negative 5y equals. Now over here on this side, I cannot combine these because they're not like terms. That's one of the biggest mistakes people make. These are not like terms because this one has an x and this one does not. So I keep them separate and we write our x term first. Now the last step is to get rid, because we're solving for y, of the number in front. And how do you get rid of the number in front or the coefficient? You divide. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side, to every single part. Those cancel, and I'm left with y equals. Two negatives make a positive 3/5 x. And then 25 divided by negative 5 is a negative 5. So I write minus 5. And now that is solved for y. Now I can put it into my calculator. I can do all kinds of things from there. Now we're going to solve a multi-step equation with variables on both sides. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my line down because whatever I do to one side I have to do to the other. And then the first thing that you should see are your parentheses. So I have to think of my please excuse my dear Aunt Sally and get rid of the parentheses first. So I'm going to use distributive property to do that. Here on the second part, a little more confusing, you got to put a 1 there. That way I know I'm distributing a negative 1 to both of these other terms. And on the other side I can't do anything. So I distribute 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 4 is 12. Now distribute the negative 1. Negative 1 times x is a negative 1x. And negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2. Just bring down this negative 2x plus 8 on the other side. Now I got to look and see if I can combine like terms. And I can combine like terms on the same side of the equal sign. And these both have an x, and these both are constant, so I can combine them. So 3x minus 1x is 2x. And 12 minus 2 is 10. And now bring down my negative 2x plus 8. Now from here, I see that I have solving for x, but there's an x on both sides of the equal sign. So I'm going to have to move one of the x's to the other side. And I'm going to choose to move the negative. That way it changes to a positive. So again, I look in front and do the opposite. The opposite of negative is to add. So I'm going to add 2x. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. And see how I grouped it with like terms. I'll bring down my 8. 2x plus 2x is 4x, and bring down my plus 10. Now my last step is this. The rest of the problem is just like from before. I got to get this 10 to the other side, so I subtract 10. Let's see. Okay, I subtract 10. 10 minus 10 cancels, and I'm left with 4x equals, and 8 minus 10 is a negative 2. And the last step is to divide by the number in front of x, which is 4. Whenever you do to one side, do to the other. So x equals negative 1/2. So that can be reduced. And so that is what x equals. I have now solved an equation with variables on both sides.